Allen?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Ms. Byrd?
Here.
Mr. McClure?
Here.
Mr. Griffith?
Here.
Ms. Kindle?
Here.
Mr. Jablonski?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Our first item is an election of officers. Do we have a nomination?
I'd like to make a nomination, please. For chair, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Byrd. For vice chair, Commissioner Parker. And for secretary, Commissioner Jablonski.
Do we have a second
I'll second.
and a vote?
You may vote. Everyone has voted. Motion carried 9-0.
Moving to the consent docket, does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Okay, reading our consent items, we have item number 2, consideration of approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of the minutes of the December 8th, 2022 regular planning commission meeting. I would take a motion
So moved.
and a second
Second.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 9-0.
It looks like we have some audience members present. If anybody would like to speak, there are some tan cards on the slips of paper on the cart. If you would fill those out with your name and address, and you can bring those up here to us, and we'll put you in order on those. Okay, moving to our first item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-21. Brian and Donna Comers request rezoning from A2 Rural Agricultural District to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow for mining activities for approximately 40 acres of property generally located on the north side of Etowah Road between 96th Avenue Southeast and 108th Avenue Southeast. And I'll take the staff presentation.
Colton Wayman with the Planning Department. We have an application from Brian and Donna Comers to rezone from A2 Rural Agricultural District to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow for mining activities. The property is located on the north side of Etowah Road between 96th Avenue Southeast and 108th Avenue Southeast. This is the subject tract. It's currently zoned A2, and all surrounding properties around there are zoned A2. To the south is the town of Slaughterville. This is the existing land use. It's currently vacant. There are single-family houses and vacant land surrounding that. This is an aerial of the site currently. Again, it's vacant.
Mining dirt.
This is looking north on Etowah Road at the property itself. This is south towards the town of Slaughterville. This is looking east on Etowah Road. This is west on Etowah Road. The applicant is requesting to rezone to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow for dirt mining activity. Currently, dirt mining is not an allowable use or special use in the A2 zoning district. Therefore, it is required that this property be rezoned to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow for dirt mining activities. Staff forwards this rezoning request as ordinance number O-2223-21 for consideration by the Planning Commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commissioners for staff?
I have a question, 2 questions. Can you tell me what zoning dirt mining usually falls into, and if we've had any other special requests like this over the years?
Sure. So dirt mining actually is not a use that's allowed in any of our zoning districts. That's why they're having to do a PUD and put it in there. I don't know of any in the past that have been quite like this.
Commissioner Jablonski, we did have one probably 5 to 7 years ago. I don't know, I'm sorry, time flies. But at the northwest corner of Tecumseh and 24th, the development that now has that a large apartment complex on it, they came back and amended their PUD to be able to mine off of that property in the very, very back. It was for a certain amount of time that they'd actually done that one.
What about on the west side of town, there's some sand mining, I think. Is that inside city limits?
I happen to know there is some sand mining outside of the city of Norman's limits to the west.
Could you actually pull up that aerial again?
Yeah, of course.
Is the applicant here for questions?
He is. He has a presentation following this.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we take the applicant presentation.
Thank you and good evening. Gunnar Joyce with Rieger Law Group on behalf of the Comers, property owners here. Let's see here. Don't know if we have slides in here. Jane, looks like.
We tried to get them in there.
I can go off the cuff too, but I'll kind of walk through these. So real quick, it's basically 40 acres. We'll just kind of talk through this one. We actually think it's a pretty close call and think that mining is a pretty appropriate use in A2 agricultural. It's pretty similar to some of the other allowable uses that you have in the district. Some of those are kind of animal raising, regular farm activities, agricultural uses, and then of note, you have country club, you have golf course, you have what you see quite frequently right now in A2 is medical marijuana growing facilities, which includes buildings, accessory buildings, and a whole bunch of improvements that really aren't capped under the base zoning of A2. So notably, this applicant's coming forward with a PUD, and this picture right here is attached as the site plan. So as you all are familiar, when you go with a PUD, you have a site plan that has to show all buildings. So this applicant, no buildings shown on the site, no improvements, so they're really locked in to a very limited intensity here. Yeah, perfect, right there. Sweet. All right, so location map, I know we're familiar with it, in between 96th Avenue and just north of Etowah Road. Aerial of property here, as staff pointed out, Colton pointed out, we have Slaughterville just to the south. You can see that black dotted line is the cutoff of the city limits. We were here, I think, 2 months ago, the very north tip, so we're back now, the very south tip of Norman. Wanted to show this slide because you can see all that similar color green is A2. So we're really surrounded by the same zoning uses here, A2 rural agriculture. That's a zoom in of the site. All of the surrounding uses are A2. And here's a quick summary. So we're retaining the spirit and intent of the current zoning. The actual PUD document just mirrors A2 except for one addition. It's dirt mining activities. The word mining and mining activities is not anywhere in the zoning code, so it's kind of interesting to note that I don't know if it's intentionally left out or just an oversight, but we believe it's very similar to, some of these other activities noted there: agricultural crops, raising of farm animals, medical marijuana, commercial grower, and educational facilities. We've limited the uses here, mining uses, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. All those other uses in A2, there's no similar limitation, so that's above and beyond the base zoning. And again, similarly, no buildings are proposed, and with the site plan here attached, no buildings could be developed other than single-family house. That's a carve-out in the PUD ordinance, that you can do that without showing the site plan. Any other building, any commercial building, anything like that of that nature would be a site plan amendment, have to come through you for rezoning process. So this is a substantial limitation on the intensity that this property can be developed at. under A2, that list of uses, and any buildings, as a matter of right, don't have to plat, don't have to zone, straight to building permit. So this limitation, no buildings other than a single-family house could happen, or we'd go through this whole process again. So a substantial limitation on the density this could be developed out. The entrance of the property from Etowah Road has to be brought up to current city standards. That's part of this proposal. The reason for the project, the property owner wants to provide dirt for local construction and landscaping projects. It's something that they're in the industry of, and they do in their other businesses, and notice that there isn't dirt within city limits. They think there's a need in this community that they could fill. And of note, this is temporary, so they can't do this forever. Eventually, they're going to run out of dirt, and the desire of the property owner is that they will eventually use this as a farm pond for the cattle that they run currently. So once it's gone, they're going to fill it up with water, and they run cattle on the 40 acres. An example of that in Norman on Franklin Road and 48th Avenue, you can see on the left is a 2005 picture of when there was a little bit of a dirt mining pit going on, and then as it exists today, that's a current picture, is now a pond. So that would be similar to what this property owner wants to do. Conclusion, just to call it out again, very minor change to the base zoning category. It's just one new allowable use, and again, a massive limitation of what could be done under the base zoning. No buildings, no medical marijuana, no farming activities. It's temporary use, and these are quotes from the staff report that I thought were notable. The PUD does not change the existing uses except for that one addition. Existing drive approach will be brought up to city standards with this request. And finally, the traffic engineer in the traffic report noted that proper site distance to allow for safe ingress and egress to and from the site is present with this proposed access. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant from commission?
Yeah, I have one. Would you speak to the hours of operation up until 8 p.m.? I know that there were some neighbor comments, and I was just curious as to why the 8 p.m. cutoff, not maybe earlier, given there could be it could be loud at times.
That was really just something that the owner felt comfortable with 8 to 8. That there might be some room there. I'm not sure. We could talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
This may be something you may or may not know, but is there a reasonable expectation as to the number of months or years of mining activity that would occur before it eventually becomes a pond on this site?
At this point, I don't know. That's something we probably could drill into if needed. I know that the Founders Park application that Jane referenced in 2015 did cap it. I think they did 4 years in that one. Just as context, for temporary use, that was 4 years. I have not talked specifically with the property owner on their expectation here, but could dig into that for council.
Any other questions for the applicant? Great. Okay, seeing none, we do have an audience comment. I'd like to call up Cheryl Blake. If this is your first time coming, what I will do is I'll set a timer for 3 minutes. If you would like a reminder 30 seconds before the end of that time, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to yield the full time to you and then let you know. Thank you for your comments at the end of that time. That's correct, yeah. Yes. I'm not aware, I don't have any other slips for this item. No, go ahead and come on up, though. We would love to hear from you. And you're just going to say your name and your address to start.
All right, my name is Cheryl Blake. I live on Fisher Road, which is east and a little bit, a couple of miles north of where this property is. So I'm just going to go through my comments and not wait for an answer on this. So after hearing what is said today, it seems to me that what you're trying to do is to make this to be it's a destruction of property versus a development of property. I don't know why you would need a permit or this. If you're going to build a farm pond, this is not the way you need to do it. If you're going to be mining, I don't know anything about the Bureau of Mines and what you do. I'm used to seeing things about mining for precious metals and things like that. This is a rural area. I don't understand why 60% of that is trees, and then you're going to turn it into a farm pond for your animals unless you're looking at all the other property. I don't know who owns the property on either side. I don't want to see this go anything but rural. I don't think there's been a consideration of the wildlife. Y'all keep talking about stuff, and then you destroy the habitat, and then everybody complains because animals get moved and all that kind of stuff. And I just see that this is not going anywhere productive right now. It's not environmentally sound at this point to take trees out of here. I don't understand, when you do this, I didn't see anything that talked about site elevations and whether or not there's runoff from any of this while you're in the process of building the pond. I don't understand this with the wasteland and getting it back in. What are you going to have to do to get it back to feed the cattle if you're stripping, and why you just can't, if you're going to build a pond, just build a pond for your animals. Let's see here. What's it going to look like if you don't do the pond there? What if you run out of money, and what's it going to be? And there are plans in the future. I see a lot of this stuff happen, and then, you bought it agricultural, and then you try to change it, and then you try to change it, and you're trying to change it. There's a reason these are zoned agricultural, and they need to stay agricultural. The city needs to quit encroaching on the east side. This is all part of the big plan when the lake came in to keep this stuff rural, and I think it's time for Norman to start considering itself landlocked. Population is decreasing. We're not having as many babies as we used to, so there's not going to be a need for a lot of this stuff in the future, and I think we need to kind of put a hold on the range right now, rein this stuff back in. This is agricultural. They knew it when they bought it. I don't know how long they bought it, whether they own the size or what, but that's what this is, and that's what it needs to be. And if you want to put in a farm pond for your cows, put in a farm pond for your cows, but don't call it development and a mining permit. If you're going to sell it, then it becomes commercial property, unless you're doing the agricultural like the guys that sell the hay that's on the property that they've owned, that they're being good stewards of the land. And I think that's probably all of my notes. So, am I under my 3 minutes?
Yeah, you did great. Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate it. After audience comments, are there any additional questions for either staff or the applicant by commission?
I do. I have a question. I guess I'm concerned about the extent of the mining and how much of the open area will be mined, and also the forested area. I'm really not wild about seeing that destroyed, so.
I'm glad that was brought up. That was a miss on my part. I apologize. That they have already gone through the Department of Mines for their permitting process and have obtained a permit from the Department of Mines. In that permit, they had to do geographic limitations on where they would mine. It's a 5-acre portion that is capped on the north end of that tree line. So it does not go into the tree line. I think the slides have already been fixed now, so I won't mess with it. But if you kind of visualize, the north end was heavily treed and wooded. The permitted area does not encroach into that at all, and there's a 62.5-foot buffer from the roadway. So that's the 5-acre site, north of a 62.5 buffer from the right-of-way, and then cut off at the tree line. So it substantially is that cleared area that you can see on the site and doesn't clear any of those trees.
Well, another question related to that, if there's going to be cattle on the property, how much of the open area will be mined and presumably a pond eventually, and how much will be for grazing?
So they utilize right now this 40 acres and the 40 acres to the east. It's a friendly party, and they share cattle. I don't think at this point they have kind of limited inside that 5 acres, so I think it's still kind of unknown, but there's substantial grazing area for the cows, both in this 40 acres and to the east.
So the owners share the grazing area? Okay.
Right.
So I've got a question, and maybe this is more for Jane. If you're zoned agricultural, and you needed to build a farm pond, what would just stop you from doing it?
I'm not sure that, Todd, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to help me on that one. As far as, there's no blue line or anything like that.
It might be a difference of selling the dirt versus taking it out, possibly.
Yeah, if they want to fill the pond, it's on their property. I think it's their right to do so. It's just, as long as they don't impact the neighbors.
No core or anything they have to do.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe that's a blue line stream or anything running through.
I mean, it looks like there's probably a utility easement of some sort. But so on an A2 zone, do you need a permit to, because I'm looking at it, 50% of it's done, 40 acres, you're running 15, 20 head of cattle at the most in there. And then you need to build a pond. Obviously, you need to build a pond. But if it's just agriculture,
Yeah.
like something just doesn't, like,
I don't
it's
know of
setting
any
well with me
permit
on
that you would
this.
need to do that. Well, there's OWRB requirements if you're building a pond, but if you're just going to fill it in, and that's what you're asking, correct?
Yeah, if you just built a pond, like, because you got to dam it up, all that. I mean, you know how a pond's built. You dig it out one side, you
Right.
dam it up. You really don't have a net dirt to get rid of.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm just country boy from eastern Oklahoma, but it just doesn't make sense.
Well, there is a OWRB requirements if the pond gets a certain size or if it, it's going to retain a certain amount of acre foot of water. But as far as the city of Norman, just our standard, stormwater regulations apply.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
as long as it's less than an acre, they don't even have to worry about that.
right,
So,
yeah, okay.
Can the applicant or the representative speak to the elevation and drainage questions that were brought up?
If we could also see an image of the easement tract with the red lines that was included, possibly, if someone can help with that.
So the drainage is addressed in the PUD that says,
I'm not recalling it mentioning in relation to the neighbor's land.
so no change from how you would develop under the base zoning. So we have adopted in,
I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure it wasn't at the very onset going to cause,
right.
spillover.
And that's also something that's just sort of outside of zoning and land use and more kind of nuisance law and tort actions if something like that happened on another property. One real quick comment, I think, on the farm was, I think Commissioner Byrd, you touched on it, this applicant wants the ability to sell the dirt as well. So triggers it from just building the farm pond into the commercial activity side here.
I mean, considering the possibility of a very large project going in pretty close to that, that's pretty smart, in my opinion, if that's where you're going with it.
Might be where the property owner's going with it. Right.
Could we see the easement tract
Yes.
again also?
So this is, you can see right there too. There's two existing easements that are outlined in red. I believe this one is an oil and gas pipeline. And I think that one's the utility easement to the city, but both of those are called out on the survey of the property and then in our site plan that no mining activities can take place in either of these.
So I just bring this up with Commissioner Griffin's question about the trees being taken out, because the way I read the PUD was the entire amount of this parcel, spare only the rear easement, and that utility easement would be allowed by the PUD to be mined. However, there's a supplementary permit that was then also given that does not actually allow the mining to happen in the rear.
That is absolutely correct, and if that's a recommendation you wanted to put on this, we'd be happy to incorporate that into the PUD.
I have one question. It's Commissioner Jablonski. Just sitting here and listening to it, overall it sounds good, but I'm imagining a giant dank body of water. Are there mining rules in this state that say once it's above a certain size, then you have to oxygenate the water or something to keep it from going gross?
I apologize, that's pretty high level, I'm not sure. I do know that this applicant did go through the Department of Mines already, and there's substantial application materials that they have to submit, and also, I do know there's a reclamation plan they had to do for the surrounding impacted area. And so basically, you know, the part that's not the mine where you're impacting with, you know, any of the activity that you do, I believe the proposal on this one was to reseed and resod the area to kind of improve the quality of the impact around the mine.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant or for staff by commission?
I just ask that we consider the precedent that this may set. So, long-term, big picture.
Any other planning commission discussion?
I have a few comments. I think it's smart to, you know, take something that would be waste and sell it. That's something I like about this. I agree that we should think about the precedent, which is why I asked what mining have we done in the city before in terms of sand or dirt or anything. Of course, if this somehow goes sour and in 5 years it looks like it was a bad idea, there's no reason why the Planning Commission would have to approve a PUD, you know, if this didn't work out.
Any other discussion? The applicant did suggest an option for making a recommendation for limiting operations within the permit. Just wanted to mention that. I know there was some question about the hours as well. If there's no other discussion, I would take a motion.
I move to approve.
And a second,
Second.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 8-1.
Moving to our next item, I'm going to read items 4 and 5 together. Item number 4, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution number R-2223-76. Sooner Traditions Realty LLC requests amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from commercial designation and high-density residential designation to commercial designation for approximately 2.19 acres of property located at 1300 West Lindsay Street. And item number 5, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-22. Sooner Traditions Realty LLC requests rezoning from CO Suburban Office Commercial District and R3 Multifamily Dwelling District to SPUDS, Simple Planned Unit Development, for approximately 2.19 acres of property located at 1300 West Lindsay Street. And I would take the staff presentation.
Colton Wayman Planning Department. We have an application from Sooner Traditions Realty LLC for a land use plan change from commercial and high-density residential designation to commercial designation at 1300 West Lindsay Street. This is the land use plan currently. It's commercial and high-density residential. To the west is commercial, to the east is commercial. To the north is high-density residential, commercial, and surrounding that, roughly to the south, is low-density residential, and also to the north and east. And the applicant's requesting to change that to commercial designation. In addition to that, the applicant's requesting to rezone from CO, Suburban Office Commercial District, and R3 Multifamily Dwelling District to SPUD, Simple Planned Unit Development. This is what it's currently zoned. And then this is the existing land use. There's currently an office building on the site. To the south is, of course, single family, some apartment complexes nearby, and then also the commercial buildings. This is the site itself, an aerial. This is looking at the site from Lindsay Street. This is looking west on Lindsay Street. This is looking east on Lindsay Street. This is looking from Rebecca Lane north at the property. This is looking west on Rebecca Lane. And then this is looking east on Rebecca Lane. And then this is the alley that leads up to the property itself. That's on the east side of the property. This is the proposed site plan. There's going to be a multi-tenant retail building just to the east of the existing office building. In addition, there will be access from that existing alley that you saw on the previous photo on the bottom side there of the site plan. Staff forwards this request as ordinance number O2223-22. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for staff?
I have a question. Can you give me a sense of where the existing building is, like if I were to overlay it on that site plan?
Yeah, so it's actually on the site plan right now. It's that office building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's it? Okay.
If I could maybe help with it, I did a assessor's page view and I'm in the area. It is pretty close to the Donut King across from Legends Restaurant. There's apartments and condos on Rebecca Lane and yeah, there's a church to the other side. I don't know if that's still the current use, but Subway was right next door.
Is the plan to retain the house as an office building?
Yeah, the plan is to retain that structure.
It's a beautiful piece of property.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I would take the applicant presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sean Rieger, representing the applicant in this case, and we thank Colton for that presentation. Let me see if we are here. There we are. Okay, so yes, Commissioner, we are on Lindsay Street. No, wait, that's the wrong one. Sorry. There we go. Here we go. We're good. Okay, so there's the street map. You see Lindsay Street right there. You're correct, Commissioner. Across the street is basically Legends. You see Berry Road over on the right and Wiley over on the left. And you'll see basically this is a kind of a leftover infill track. It is a beautiful piece of property, Commissioner, and is really in the middle of a bunch of commercial. You see the C2 and the C1, the C2 and the C1 and the C2. All of this frontage on Lindsay is commercial. And so this is an aerial of the property. You can see across the street, if you see my pointer, that is Legends Restaurant right there. Donut King right here, which I have enjoyed many times over the years, is right there. And you see what used to be a hardware store many, many years ago and then turned into a church right there. It's important to note, you see the alley coming in from the side right there. That is a city alley that connects over to Berry Street. And you'll see in just a moment how we're going to utilize that. It's about a 2.19 acre site. There is an existing house structure, looking structure, used as an office on this site. That will remain, and I'll show you an overlay that shows you how that will happen. Existing 2025, and I think this is important to show, you see the red all the way across Lindsay Street right there. That red is 2025, saying the plan is for the front half of this site to be commercial. And the south half of that site would be high-density residential. You can see the proposed is all commercial. On the right is, the current zoning is CO, and there's a little bitty strip in the back that is R3. You see that tiny little sliver in the back is zoned R3. Most of it is zoned CO, and that's why it's used as an office right now. The plan is to go to a SPUD, simple plan unit development, for the whole site. This is the site plan that you can see. Colton showed this as well. We'll spend a little bit of time on this because I want to show you a little bit about it. We have turned now, so north is to the right, so don't be confused by that. A lot of times we shift these images around a little bit. So north is to the right, so Legends is right across the street over here about where the W is on West Lindsay. And so Lindsay Street, we're maintaining the existing access point. We're not moving the access point. And we are trying to maintain as many of these trees around the perimeter as possible. I'll go back, and you will see there is basically large open space in the middle of this site. The trees basically ring it around the front on this property. We're going to try to retain as many of those as possible. Fortunately, they're large enough trees that we can do what's called grub up. We can lift the branches off the bottom. They're big enough, they're tall enough that we will be able to see under those. And that's key for retail and commercial, is that we can see under the trees and through them. Fortunately, these are big enough, we're going to be able to do that. So we will retain those trees to the extent we can all around the front part of this property. You can see it's basically a small building of about 1,500 square feet of each tenant, 4 tenants. That's really quite a small commercial building, and I'll show you in context in just a moment. The front part of the site is shown as parcel A, 0.98 acres, and it basically goes back to a line right about there that lines up with the alley. And so the front part of the site is the commercial part of the site with, of course, parking ringing around it and a drive-through that is up in here. And then the office building in the back is retained in its current condition. And this site plan carries through with the SPUD. So as you probably have learned by now, SPUDs carry through with the site plan. If there was anything different proposed on this site plan, we would have to come back and get site plan approval again. So there's nothing that can happen on the back half of that site without coming before you again with a site plan amendment. So that existing structure stays, as does all of the open space, the trees, all of that landscaping in the back. If you look at that in context, what you see is basically the back half of the site, and we just took the site plan off because there's no changes planned back here. So that house structure right there with open space is all unchanged. So the only change you will see is what you've seen here, which is the front part of that site, with the parking all around the structure, the trees preserved around the perimeter, and then the alley connecting in from the right. There was some discussions from one neighbor that seemed concerned when she came to the pre-development was whether we were going to connect down to Rebecca Lane. We are not. There is no connection to Rebecca Lane, only to the existing city alley to the right, and only the existing connection at the north. And that's it. So you can see the context. That building really in context is really quite small. You can see it's relatively similar to the size of the commercial buildings around it, except for the very large one immediately to the left. And I guess the slide got reversed a little bit. That's what it looks like with the overlay on it. But if you take that off, it's the same in the back. So there's no change in the back. Traffic, we're using the existing alley. There were some questions whether we should connect to the alley to the west. Staff did not want us to, and there's a grade change. There's a retaining wall there, so we're not really able to connect to the west. But it certainly should be plenty sufficient to connect to the alley to the right and the existing access point there. Staff comments were because the existing access point on West Lindsay is not changing, no traffic study is required, and there is no proposed access point to Rebecca Lane, so the development will not direct any commercial traffic back into the neighborhood. Stormwater drainage, the engineer is here tonight, Steve Rollins with Arc Engineering, if you wish to hear more, but he did a full drainage study of this site. The site currently is kind of a dome. The house structure is sort of the top. And so the front part of the site, the Lindsay Street, drains to the north. The back part of the site drains to the south. Again, north on this picture is to the right. So from that existing office building, it drains to the left, but we're basically untouching that with no changes. So it will be no difference in the drainage to the west, to the south. On the right, you can see where the site is the commercial. We are basically utilizing low-impact development, and Steve has done the project so that there is a bio-retention pond, a rain garden in the front with tree wells, and you kind of see the yellow highlights there. Those are the tree wells. You see tree wells dotted all around this site with a bio-retention well, basin up at the north side. And then also best management practices that will help filter that stormwater and reduce the amount of the stormwater that's leaving the site. Staff reports, we appreciate staff's work to help us through this. The staff report says the 2007 streetscape project, which we all know on Lindsay was done to widen it and put a median, really significant landscape work on Lindsay. That project was created to help spark redevelopment of West Lindsay Street in this general area. So that was the goal, and here we are with a project to revitalize West Lindsay Street. Surrounding properties on Lindsay Street are commercial districts allowing for similar uses. And staff also noted that the southeast corner of Lindsay and Berry was redeveloped into a restaurant and a parking lot, and the southwest corner of Lindsay and Berry is about to be redeveloped into a Starbucks. So there is continued activity in this immediate area of redevelopment. The project will meet the commercial outdoor lighting ordinance, full cutoff lighting. Again, no access to Rebecca Lane, and the existing green space to the south of that office building will be entirely preserved. So in summary, I've mentioned those two first items, LID, BMP. Pre-development, we had two people come to the meeting. One of them asked about access and drives. The other one was a neighbor who was a representative of the bank across the street, I believe, and he spoke positively. He appreciated that there was new development happening on West Lindsay in kind with the streetscape project, so we were appreciative of that. Greenbelt Commission, no comments, they approved it, and no protests have been filed. We have not heard anybody negative speak to it at this point. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for applicant?
Will the existing law office, which is what the house was used for, will it be retained as a law office, or is the owner?
I don't know. It will be retained as the structure, but the uses will be anything allowable in this project.
The other question I have was about, that's a large green space. I presume the plans to maintain that and keep it in good order are part of the project, so.
Yes, and we would have to, because this would be fully, of course, platted land. If we let the grass grow higher than 12 inches, we get code enforcement. So, but in commercial, I think it's fair to say, in new commercial, you don't see new commercial typically having poor landscaping maintenance because it becomes a problem of the imagery of that commercial. So, yeah, I think this will be well maintained.
Well, I have no doubt. It's just a rather large space to be associated with a new commercial development, so.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, Sean, can you back up to the slide that you had that showed the alley connection? I don't have a
right
question about that. What I do have a question about is in the area where your stormwater detention, it looks like there's a water line that maybe runs through there. Or unless the GIS information is incorrect.
Those are pretty general GIS. I don't know that they locate those dimensionally very precisely, but certainly we would have to deal with that if it's there. We would have to design around that or deal with the movement of the detention pond, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would just say that, I mean, worst case scenario, you do underground underneath the parking lot, it can be mitigated, but, I mean, that just jumped out at me when I was looking at that.
Yeah.
I would just like to commend the applicant on keeping the mature trees. I think that's, and the open space, of course, but I think that it's really important that the trees are preserved, so.
Thank you.
I agree with that comment. Quick question for you. Recently, we had a proposal come to us, and they had to be careful where they placed a residential unit because of a cell tower. I think there is a cell tower close to here, and I was just curious, do you know how far away that is from this building?
I don't, but I believe the ordinance you're talking about, and that was the subtext living property that came.
Yeah.
The ordinance talks about a 200-foot separation, but I believe that's only from residential, 200 feet from residential, if I recall correctly. So I don't believe it affects on just CF commercial.
Any other questions for the applicant? Could you, I didn't see any of the aerial images that showed the median for Lindsay Street. Oh, that's great.
Right there.
So just looking at the ability to make a left turn in, is the median blocking the ability to make a left turn?
Good question. I can't tell from this aerial. I don't recall if it is or not. Let me go to a different.
I don't think it is, because I think I've done U-turns there to get the Donut King.
Well, you have your dedicated turn lane that's right in front of it.
Yeah, you have, what Lindsay accommodates is basically U-turns at every one of them you see on the left. So you basically can U-turn up and down Lindsay Street. So if you don't have a median right in front of you, you can go a little ways and U-turn back is basically how it's handled.
That's how I go to Legends myself, so.
Yeah.
Like it or not, that's how it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Sorry, jumped in at the end. Okay, seeing
Thank
them,
you.
we did have an audience comment. I'd like to welcome back Mr. Ross. And if you will just come up and state your name and address, And I'm going to start our timer. If you would like a 30-second reminder, let me know. You would? Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Adam Ross, 3308 Winchester Circle. Firstly, thank you to the developer for choosing to invest in Norman. I would like to say I think it is unwise to rezone any R3 residential right now to become commercial, since the whole reason we are having an affordable housing problem is that cities have too much commercial, not enough residential. In particular, not enough non-R1 residential. Perhaps the developer would consider adding some small multifamily units here along with the commercial, or ideally mixed-use buildings with residential on top, commercial on bottom, the most economically productive option. Next, I do think that a sidewalk, not a road, through the back of this development connecting to Rebecca Lane would be good. Considering there are no existing homes on the north side of Rebecca Lane, I think this is an easy opportunity for pedestrian connectivity so that we can stop building developments that force people to drive to the store they live directly adjacent to. While I appreciate the efforts to save as many trees as possible, there is a very mature tree at the front near Lindsay, probably the largest one on this property, that appears to be proposed for removal. It seems the only reason for this is because of the detention pond, which is ironically only necessary because of the overabundance of impervious parking. If you look at this area on Google Earth, the satellite image is from July in 2022 and reveals just how much shade this tree provides to the sidewalk and this lot of land in the summertime. The new trees on Lindsay, while close to the sidewalk, won't be as effective at this since they're on the north side of the sidewalk. They will provide some shade decades from now, but it still won't be as much, even though the sun is at its highest in the summer. I'm not really much of an environmentalist. I drove a truck here. But it is hard to deny the benefits that trees have by reducing temperatures, creating inviting spaces, absorbing rainwater, and improving property value, public health, and retail viability. If the developer is concerned about business visibility, then I would like to pull a quote from this book. Visibility-seeking merchants who fight for tree removal forget that much Main Street shopping is experience-based. With cheaper prices and better convenience on Amazon and other large stores around town, providing a great environment is becoming central to retail viability. Observe Legends across the street or Library Bar and Grill for proof of this. I acknowledge that Lindsay Street is not Main Street, but it might as well be for this part of Norman. To close, I want to thank the developer again, and I acknowledge most everyone here probably has more knowledge and experience than me. These are just my own observations and humble requests. I also recognize that this area doesn't need to be an entirely walkable urban oasis, although this spot definitely could be its
30 seconds remaining.
All right, its own new thing, unique to the rest of the businesses along Lindsay, helping it to stand out, especially considering that this is on a bike lane, bus route, and is very close to campus. It only takes a few small adjustments to a site plan to make things like this possible for this lot and for areas around it in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other audience comments? Okay, if you'd like to fill out a card on the cart, and then you'll bring up the sheet up here for us. Thanks. The cart, the beige cart, that's okay. Yeah, so if you will fill that out, and then you'll come up to, yep, the podium with and state your name and address to start. The 12th, January 12th. Of 2023. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, was there any other planning commission discussion? Or based on the comment we heard, are there any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question for the applicant since we're waiting. If there is a water main there, would the applicant just limb up those trees and leave them and do the retention a different way if they couldn't do the retention right there?
We've thought about underground detention was mentioned. Steve and I were just talking about it. You could do underground. This site drains that way, though, so we need to capture it all at that edge is the primary issue here. So I don't know. It's something, it's a design detail we'd have to get into, but something we would look at when we did the details.
While we're waiting on our comment, also low-impact development, you talked about grass being under 12 inches.
Yeah.
I know on some of those low-impact development, rain gardens and stuff, you do see some taller grass and stuff. I'm not opposed to it. They make them look really good. And it's actually, we need to see more of it in Norman.
I agree.
It's a big one. It cleans our stormwater and it gives us a lot of little places to tuck that away because we fight it every day. So,
Yeah, and just to clarify, I wasn't talking about up in the bio retention swell up here. When I mentioned the 12-inch height, I was talking about the lower part.
oh, okay.
Because that's what I think you were talking about when you were talking about the big area to maintain, this southern area. That's what I was talking about,
Yep.
would be keeping it mowed. But yeah, up on the north edge, a bio retention swell typically does have some significant
I got my
gradient.
plug in there, so.
Yeah.
So to the comment was made about saving the tree, is there a possibility that the tree that's going to be removed for the drainage issue, is there any way that could be saved and trimmed up, like you said, so
Yeah.
the commercial has visibility?
It's tough. We'll look at it, but you have to have detention, basically.
Oh, yeah.
We have all these competing agendas that we have to have in planning a site. And so we don't want to move the access point.
No.
We want to keep it where it's at. So if we move the access point, then you can put the detention over, but then that creates a problem with the concrete of the access point. So it's difficult. We've tried very hard to retain as much as we can. At some point, it's pretty impossible to maintain every tree, but we've maintained a lot of them, and most of them are around the perimeter. We just need that detention pond on the north, though.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Are you ready for making a comment? Would you like to come up to the podium and state your name and address? Yeah, go ahead. So also, I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. If you would like a warning 30 seconds before the time is up, let me know. Otherwise, I'll yield the full time and then thank you for your comments. So, yep. And just, that one. And then if you will just say your name and address to start.
You don't need this before you got to make sure I'm real.
Yeah, we can take that. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, who do I who do I address as I'm speaking?
Just the commission and
Well,
start with.
Oklahoma, Norman, the state of Oklahoma, the United States.
Could you
my
please
name,
start with your name and address?
My name is Braylon Lejay Polite. BraylonLajayPolite. Nice to meet you guys.
And then your address, please.
My address is 240 E. When the E is on the stop sign, that means east, right?
Yes.
East Kerr, Kerr Drive, Midwest City, Oklahoma, zip code 73110.
Thank you.
I can talk.
Yes, go for it.
I was raised by a good mother and a good grandpa, and I have a little brother that is near and dear to my heart. And he just had his son, which is what? My nephew. And I love my nephew and my mom and myself and my brother so much, I would sacrifice my life for them. I know a lot, but I don't know. Well, actually, I know too much. That's why my mom was so strict on me, because I've always known too much. You know, I'm a fast learner. I pick up on things very quickly. You know what I'm saying? Since first grade. That's why I got held back in first grade. And I had a best friend. He used to make fun of me for getting held back, but I was a little smarter than him. So I understand why he'd be mad. And then guess what happened in the second grade? When I got to second grade, he got held back too. Excuse my laughter. I believe justice is justice, right is right, and wrong is wrong. What's April 1889? Oh, never mind. You don't have to answer. It's okay. Yeah, I believe right is right, wrong is wrong. In the state of Oklahoma, and are you guys jurors, or what are you guys? Oh, commission. I believe justice has been served, and I've been bathed in the blood of Jesus. Bird, Erica Bird. Bird. I got a little bro we call Bird in my old neighborhood. I forgot his real name, but good dude. I know two birds actually. You kill two birds with one stone. And I'm one stone, I tell you. But I believe justice has been served. And thank you guys for your time. And I will go take my seat and wait for this thing to be wrapped up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any other commission discussion?
I just have a few comments. Looking at the 2025 plan, I do think the orientation of this site plan was done within the spirit of the plan. Given that there's C2 on either side of this property lining the front of Lindsay Street, just a comment, and it's not going to prevent me from voting in favor of the application. I do think that this was a prime opportunity that was missed to have a little more creativity with this development, specifically with the orientation of the retail and the building on the site. One of my, call it criticism or disappointments in Lindsay that I think is holding it back is the sea of parking that we see in front of so many buildings up and down Lindsay Street. And, you know, as kind of the gateway to the university, if you will, it's not an attractive drive-in from I-35. And I'm afraid this is not going to add to the attractiveness of the drive-in when we could have had something that could have been special, which is hard to pull off when there's an existing building on site. But when you're building new on essentially what is a greenfield development, it's a lot cheaper to do. You can get a lot more creative with it, and that didn't happen with this. So it's again, it's within the spirit of the plan. So it's difficult for me to vote against this. At the same time, I wish could have had a different result. So.
Thank you.
And specifically, I will say, outside of design, the orientation of the building on site, I appreciated the comments about walkability. Given how close this is to Barry and close to the university, and the fact that we do have these green bike lanes that unfortunately you don't see bikes on very much, this was a great opportunity to orient the building closer to the street and have parking in the back, especially when you have an alleyway in the back. So I just say this, something to think about from a development standpoint. There aren't many other opportunities to do this outside of kind of the seas of parking that we have in front of Homeland and some other sites where you can have frontage development with less of a setback as part of that and parking in the back. So again, sorry, those are ending my thoughts there. So.
Thank you. Any other commission discussion?
Yeah, we had this conversation around the development at the intersection of Barry and Lindsay, right, where in the northeast corner, they were bringing the building forward and putting the parking in the back deliberately, for the reason you're saying, Commissioner Brewer. So I'll ask the commission a question. Is there a way that we can stimulate the kind of development that we think would be more productive in terms of beautifying the area?
I don't know, that might even be a question for the applicant. Well, what would stimulate them more, right? I think that's maybe a question that can't be resolved on a single project, but maybe I think a place a commission could start would be by having discussion over the topics that might help a developer know what we are looking for seeing. We frequently talk about trees. There's a lot of commissioners especially that are very passionate about the trees. So I think that I have seen a trend of the applicants coming before us bringing up the trees before they have to be asked and incorporating that into the site like in this. So I think that might be an example of such, but I think continuing to have the discussion and give some guidance and through discussion and making sure we say something. Open to other thoughts on that, but.
Yeah, I mean, just continuing that, I'm all about the idea of kind of proactive conversation with a lot of that. I do think that, more heads in the room than just one sometimes often leads to a better result. And, if it just again, something to keep in mind from a development perspective. If anybody wants to come and ask us those questions, I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other commission discussion for this project? Okay. All right. Seeing none, I would take a motion
Move to approve.
Second.
and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has, the motion carried 9-0.
Moving to miscellaneous discussion, does the staff have any information for the commission?
I will tell you that we received no applications for the February Planning Commission meeting. So unless there's a request for a study session or such, we won't have a Planning Commission meeting in February.
And will we be meeting in February and/or March in this building? Or will we be moved to another building potentially?
I don't know the timeline on that yet. We are over in the new building. We have moved, but the meeting rooms and the AV equipment and stuff is not done yet. And so we don't have a timeline yet for that. But, I mean, we'll let you know, and they'll be posted where the meetings are going to be held.
Great. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, if there's nothing else to come before